In our last lesson, we talked at great length about the February Revolution of 1905 that happened in Russia. In our last lesson, we talked at great length about the February Revolution of 1917 that happened in Russia. We learned that it was this February Revolution of 1917 that managed to overthrow the Tsar. That provisional government was dominated by the bourgeoisie, which is why Vladimir Lenin, the great Bolshevik leader, was of the opinion that Soviets should take over power in Russia. In this lesson, we will be tracing the trajectory of events that happened in Russia around this time, following which we will discuss the Bolshevik Revolution of 1907 that was a major political event to happen in Russia. Fearing that the provisional government might begin a dictatorial regime in Russia, Lenin now began discussing a full-fledged socialist revolution. We know that this provisional government tried its best to thwart and suppress the Bolshevik revolutionaries, because the provisional government was not pro-socialism in the truest sense of the term. Though the provisional government instituted a new system of governance in Russia after the fall of the Russian Empire in 1917, it was dominated by the wealthy and propertied men. So the working class, the proletariats, did not find any representation or recognition in the provisional government. But Lenin was all for the working class members, for the proletariats, and he was now fearing that the provisional government might begin another dictatorial regime in Russia. Now, after defeating the Tsars, no one in Russia was ready to face another dictatorial regime. And so, Lenin now started discussing a full-fledged socialist revolution with the Bolshevik supporters in the army, Soviets and factories in September 1917. So, these were the stepping stones which led to the final October Revolution of 1917. And after holding many debates and discussions on how socialist takeover of power in Russia will happen, on October 16, 1917, Lenin united the Petrograd Soviet as well as the Bolshevik Party for a socialist seizure of power. So Lenin now started holding a series of debates and discussions on how socialist takeover of power in Russia will happen. And on October 16, 1917, Lenin united the Petrograd Soviet as well as the Bolshevik Party for a socialist seizure of power. Now all these debates and discussions were happening very secretly so that the provisional government did not get to know about the date when this socialist seizure of power would begin, so that the provisional government did not get to prepare itself against this opposition. And along with mobilizing the masses, along with bringing together the Petrograd Soviet and the Bolshevik Party, Lenin knew that he would need a very strong military force in order to counter the forces of the provisional government. A military revolutionary committee was now formed under the leadership of the Russian-Ukrainian Marxist revolutionary Leon Trotsky. So this was Leon Trotsky, under whose leadership this military revolutionary committee was formed, and this committee was tasked to organize the seizure very meticulously. So at this point of time, very strategic and diplomatic decisions were being made by Lenin as well as the party officials so that they could overthrow the rule of the provisional government, so that they could now institute a new socialist government in Russia. Before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. Under whose leadership was the Military Revolutionary Committee formed in Russia? Was it formed under the leadership of Julius Martov, Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, or Joseph Stalin? Well, the correct answer is Leon Trotsky. Under the leadership of Leon Trotsky, this body called the Military Revolutionary Committee was formed, and this was tasked to organize the socialist seizure of power in Russia very efficiently and meticulously. No revolution can happen very suddenly. After many long hours of debates and discussions, the Military Revolutionary Committee was successful in deciding the date on which the socialist seizure of power in Russia would begin. And the socialist insurgents began on October 24, 1917. When these insurgents began against the provisional government, the provisional government's minister chairman or Prime Minister Alexander Kerensky left the city of Petrograd. So at this point of time, the provisional government knew that its time was almost over, and so its minister chairman or Prime Minister Alexander Kerensky now left the city of Petrograd. So this now made it much easier for the socialist insurgents to spread itself throughout Petrograd as well as in different parts of Russia. Now, there were many people who supported the provisional government. There were many people in the army, many people among the masses who supported that the provisional government should rule Russia. And the provisional government's troops now seized the buildings of two Bolshevik newspapers. They also took over telephone and telegraph offices. Now, why do you think this was done? The provisional government initially left no stones unturned in suppressing these socialist insurgents, and by taking over telephone and telegraph offices, by seizing two Bolshevik newspapers' offices, the provisional government's troops thought that they would be able to stop or spoil the communication system of the Bolsheviks, of the socialists. And if the communication systems of these insurgents could be destroyed completely, then the provisional government's troops thought that these people would not be able to coordinate the insurgents properly. And it is for this reason that they now started taking over telephone and telegraph offices. But the Bolsheviks under the leadership of Lenin were not to be deterred. They were not to go back. They were here to march forward against the provisional government, and they wanted to establish a new socialist government in Russia. So instantaneously, the Military Revolutionary Committee's supporters now began seizing government offices. So by seizing government offices, they thought that they would now be able to defeat the provisional government and its officials. At the same time, many ministers of the provisional government were also arrested by the Military Revolutionary Committee under the leadership of Leon Trotsky. During this time, a series of clashes and conflicts took place between the Bolshevik troops on the one hand and the provisional government's troops on the other hand. Both were not wanting to retreat. They did not want to go back even a step. And so the socialist insurgents was trying to become as powerful as possible in order to outdo the provisional government. And later in the day, the Russian protected cruiser Aurora shelled the Winter Palace, which was the center of power of the provisional government following the fall of the Russian Empire. And several other vessels sailing down the river Neva now took over many military bases. So now they were attacking the military bases as well as the Winter Palace of the provisional government. Now it was not very easy for the Bolsheviks to take over power in Russia. We just mentioned this point that many clashes and conflicts took place. Many people lost their lives in this process. But by December 1917, the main Moscow-Petrograd area was under the control of the Bolsheviks. And so, the provisional government was at this point almost dissolving, so to speak. And a majority of the All-Russian Congress of Soviets now supported the Bolshevik takeover of Russia. They believed that the Bolsheviks would now institute a new socialist government in Russia. With this, we come to an end of our discussion on the Russian Revolution of October 1917. We learned how the grounds were already fertile for the seeds to grow into crops. That is to say, people knew that they can now overthrow the provisional government which was dominated by the bourgeoisie. And so the Bolsheviks, under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, now planned the socialist insurgents in Russia. Lenin wanted to establish the rule of the proletariats in Russia, and it so wanted to do away with the existent provisional government. Many clashes and conflicts took place between the provisional government on the one hand and the Bolshevik party or the socialist insurgents on the other hand. And it was on October 24, 1917 that the socialist insurgents actually began. By this point of time, the provisional government knew that its time was almost over. In fact, its minister chairman Alexander Kerensky also left the city of Petrograd. Slowly, the Bolsheviks took over not just the city of Petrograd, but various other places like Moscow and other important cities throughout Russia. Now, having learned about how the Bolsheviks started influencing Russia from this point of time, in our subsequent lesson we will be looking at the changes that followed the Russian Revolution of 1917. In that lesson we will talk about what happened to the Russian society and governance when the Bolsheviks came to power. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.